In 2016 my husband and I purchased a foreclosed home on over 10 acres in 2016. When my friend sent me the listing, I saw the street name and was curious. I didn't know what it would actually mean in the near future. Now I won't be posting the name of the street or the state we live in just for safety reasons. Why? I listen to too much true crime and know better. Y'all some weirdos. The history asterisk. The graveyard. My street is named after a long-lost graveyard that was the final resting place for many people in a small community of enslaved peoples. There is written and transcribed history of its location, but it's never been found, and all that remember its location have now passed on. The only major clue we have is that it was marked by a large brown stone. In our area stones and boulders are not common, so that would be a good landmark, but it has never been located. The reason this graveyard is notable is for one supposed resident. From my reading, he was a well-known enslaved man who became a soldier and later a talented author publishing multiple books. His life is fairly well documented, but the end of his life is where the details fray. Due to being forced into hiding, his whereabouts become hard to track. Some say he perished in Pennsylvania, while local lore insists he died and was buried here. Other known residents, Henny. There have been stories as well as information listed in records and maps of a descendant of enslaved people, a woman named Henny who also lived in this area. One of my neighbors who has lived on this land since childhood remembers her when she was living. I have another neighbor who recently built his home on family land. One day I had the pleasure of meeting his extended family. They were telling me about their history on the land when the eldest grandmother told me of her mother's cabin. She pointed into the woods nearby where I knew the ruins of a cabin were and said, "My mama was Mrs. Henny and I was born in a cabin right over there." Henny is relevant later. The spooky asterisk. I'm just going to list these in order. The distorted broadcast. We had to do a large amount of renovation when we bought the home, so we spent time there with very little furniture. No TV, no stereo, no radio. We used headphones for audio entertainment, but mostly it was very quiet there. I had been at the house all day and had been hearing this strange garbled sound all day. It was faint, but it sounded as if you had an AM radio tuned between two stations. I could hear talking but not understand the words, and there was static along with an occasional few notes of out-of-tune music. I had been hearing this all day and finally mentioned it to my husband when he came home. He sort of froze and stared at me. I said, "What?" and then he told me that he had been out in the woods exploring and found an old glass tube radio. He of course thought that it was neat and brought it home. He put it in the basement just that morning. There's a door going between my basement to my garage that is large, heavy, poorly fitted, and a pain to open and close. When you do close it, there's quite a big sound from the big door squeezing into the almost too small frame. I have been home alone on multiple occasions when I know that door is closed and I suddenly hear it close on its own, without hearing it open. The elemental. I consider myself sort of sensitive to things beyond the veil. Enough so that I've educated myself on the different manifestations that can occur. I strongly believe there is something that resides in my basement that is not human. It's energy without a face but a lot of opinions. We have experienced cold breezes, lights going off and on, and just a general feeling of fuck off, not in a violent way, but in a, I've manifested here, this is mine, get out. Some days it doesn't mind sharing space, others you can feel it rushing and pushing you out of its area. It seems to mind me less than my husband and former dog walker. It could be who shuts, and I assume has to open, the door. The lighter. My entire life I have believed in the paranormal but had never experienced something that I couldn't explain. That changed in this house. My husband and I were cooking dinner when a series of strange events occurred. We had fully moved into the house and had the Alexa playing music. We were listening along when the song changed mid-chorus to Tequila makes her clothes fall off, and this is going to seem made up, but I swear to y'all this is what happened next. A bottle of Patron that had been sitting on the counter since our wedding a year earlier, we don't drink, it was left over and had been sealed since, it suddenly expelled its cork onto the counter. We both watched it happen. Taking my cue that something wasn't right here, I went to grab some sage from storage. How I thought that was going to help, I don't even know. From the kitchen I hear my husband shout, "No, fuck this, burn the whole house down." I come back in, confused, and he says while pointing to one of two long-nosed lighters we had on the counter because our stove wasn't lighting properly, that lighter just spun around on the table completely on its own. He was pointing to the purple lighter with a red one beside it. I was shocked and rejected the idea as some sort of joke. I said no it didn't, you're making that up. I finished my sentence and watched as right in front of me the red lighter did its own spin as if spun by an invisible hand. That is one sight I cannot explain or dismiss. The emergency, at 4 a.m. I was passed out on the couch, the house was quiet. Suddenly there's loud banging and flashlights at my front door. I scream. My husband comes running out of our room in his drawers and answers the door to 4 county police officers, guns drawn. Once he verifies that he's the homeowner, they ask if anyone was in distress. We told them no, and asked why. Apparently, the sheriff's department had received not 1 but 3 calls from our landline to 911 where they only heard screaming. We don't have a landline phone. Even more than that, the power company accidentally cut our physical landline cable in the ground over a year prior. Henny, this story is borrowed from my neighbor who knew Henny. When my neighbor was a child, her father was a farmer and used to give Henny produce. Every day Henny would walk 2 miles over fields and woods to pick up various veggies from his farm. Now this wouldn't be that odd, but Henny was in her 80s and completely blind. Stories were told that Henny was a witch and that is how she managed the journey without her sight. Even more stories about how her sight was lost. They said when she was much younger that she had found out her husband had been having multiple affairs. To punish him she cast a spell or brewed a potion that made him deaf, blind, and mute so that no woman would want him. The payoff for that spell was that when he died, she would also suffer one of the 3 fates. He died years later and suddenly she went blind. Many years later after her passing, her cabin still partially standing but mostly overtaken by the woods, my neighbor and her brother were riding horses down the road. Suddenly these calm, bomb-proof, quiet, sensible horses planted their feet and refused to move another inch. No matter what they did to push them forward, the horses pranced, pawed, and wanted to turn back down the road. When my neighbor looked to find what they were so upset about, she followed their gaze to the edge of the woods where the walls of Henny's cabin stood, and there within a window was Henny watching them with her milky blind eyes. Smaller occurrences, just weird little things that have happened that don't have a whole story attached. Barn. We cleared land and built a barn in 2019. Since then I have heard the songs of a child and the voice of a man in the barn. Clear enough that I've gone looking for them. I don't know the workings of new structures attracting spirits, but we never experienced this before the barn was built. It seems that if there is a spirit of a female child, she likes the horses. I do find missing things in places that make no sense at all. Like she's playing with me. I never hear the singing and the harsh male voice at the same time, so I don't think they get on. The light in the woods. When we moved to the property there was no one around for acres and thick mature forest surrounding us. We cleared some land for a paddock for our horses and then started noticing a warm orange light in the woods just beyond the fence line. I saw the light one night and insisted we investigate in case it was someone camping in our woods. My husband was not interested in seeing the spooky light in the woods and said we should wait till daytime and then look. The next day we hiked up there to see what it could be. We found the ruins of another cabin that we did not know was there, exactly where the light was shining. We still see the light. Man in overalls. Both my husband and I have seen sort of out of the corner of my eye type of thing, an older black man with curly white hair wearing overalls. Usually, when we are out doing something on the land, we just see him walking on the farm like he has somewhere to be. No interactions, just a brief flash of him and movement and then he's gone. There's more that I'm sure I have forgotten or blocked out of my mind. I have a lot of interest in locating the graveyard and giving it and its residents the respect it deserves, as well as having a medium do a visit of our farm.